So we welcome all of you to the session today, where we're going to focus on the production possibilities cave. So that's my understanding, like I said earlier, I believe that this is, from what I've seen, I believe this is going to be your assignment number 1. And because this module, this ECS1501 in particular, is now a year module, it's very important that you make sure you have to pass, because if you don't, I'm not sure if they have a semester arrangement for those who have failed the year, but otherwise you don't, repeating for the entire year is a very painful thing. So we will try to help you as much as we can, and if you would like to join classes, you are free to do that. But now let us focus on the business of the day. So we have the production possibilities curve, right? So where does the production possibilities curve come from? So it comes from the concept, it comes from the general concept of economics, right? So the general concept of economics has to do with resources and using resources that are available to satisfy the unlimited needs of the people, right? So we have resources that we use, and we use these resources to satisfy the needs of the people, right, of the human society. And these resources, we're not going to focus on these resources in this particular discussion, but we're going to use them as a basis for why we have the production possibilities curve. So these resources could include, these resources are sometimes referred to as your factors of production. All right. And these factors of production are limited or are scarce. So we're gonna sometimes we refer to them as scarce resources, limited resources, or factors of production. So you know them as your land, your labor, what else is it? Capital and entrepreneurship. All right. So these are things that you should be able to understand. Now, because our resources are limited, we won't be able to produce as much as we want, because our wants are unlimited. Our needs are unlimited. So as a result, we can only do so much with the resources we have, which means that at any given point in time, if we take all the resources and we put those resources to their maximum use, then we are able to produce a certain quantity of the needs of people, right? A certain output. So the production possibility is looking at what can we produce, the maximum we can produce given the resources available. Right. So we're looking at the resources available and the goods or services that we would like to produce, and to say, given the resources we have, if we put the resources we have to their maximum use, to their best use, right? How much can we produce of the goods that we want? All right. So that's why we talk of possibility, production possibility. How much can we possibly produce if we put our resources to their maximum use? Right. How much resources can we produce? So we can plot. So what we normally do in economics is that we're gonna just take an example of 2 goods. So we can take goods like, for example, we consider goods like your capital goods, which are used for producing other goods, and consumer goods, which are goods that are used for consumption purposes. Because they are the end product, we're not going to use them for anything except production. So let's assume we only want to produce capital goods and consumer goods. Then we have to look at, we can draw a graph, right, representing output for consumer goods and representing output for capital goods. And then we say what's the maximum amount of capital goods we can produce? The maximum possible. If we produce only capital goods and we don't produce any consumer goods. So this is going to give us a point here, an intercept on that capital goods line, right? So this is going to be the point where we produce this is the maximum possible we can produce for capital goods if we are not producing any consumer goods, or if we are producing zero consumer goods. Then we also have the maximum that we can produce for consumer goods if we are producing zero what is this, capital goods. Then in between we have a combination of how many can we produce of this. So let's say we can produce so much of these capital goods, and if we produce at that level, then we are able to produce something for consumer goods. All right. So in other words, we end up having a cave that gives us the maximum possible combinations. So this will be a zero combination for consumer goods and the maximum for capital. All right. And this is the maximum for consumer goods and zero for capital goods. And all these in between here are combinations, possible combinations. But these are maximum. All right, the maximum possible. Because remember, we could produce inside here, but we can't produce outside here because our resources do not allow us to produce there. We can't. This is the maximum our resources can do. That is our land, our labor, our people, and our entrepreneurs. All right, these people are going to be the land, labor, capital. Sorry, it's not people. People are meant labor. All right. And you also need to study those aspects of the factors of production and look at what is labor, what is human capital, and so forth. What is the difference between quantity and quality of labor? Right. So to get us to discuss some of the key concepts, all right, of the to discuss the key concepts of this production possibilities curve, we're gonna follow the questions that I have here. All right, so let us follow the program that we have. All right, so for us to determine the maximum possible combinations, right, we are looking at resources being fully and efficiently employed. All right, so full employment. So for us to any point on the production possibilities curve represents full employment as well as efficient employment. All right. So any point on the PPC, so let's say a point on the PPC, right, represents full employment. A point on the PPC represents efficient utilization, right? Because we are getting the maximum, we are producing at our maximum level. All right. So we're going to come to those aspects of efficiency a bit later. So which means that when we draw the PPC curve, we draw a PPC curve at a point in time. All right. So we just say, okay, on the 31st of December, this is the maximum we could. So it is at a point in time. And at that point in time, we assume that the resources or factors of production are constant or are as given. In other words, we are going to say, okay, with so much labor, so much capital, so much entrepreneurship, so much land. Land, remember, land is natural resources, right? With so much, given so much. All right, how much can we produce if we fully employ all the resources? And once we fully employ them, then we efficiently utilize them. So how much can we produce? So for us to determine how much we can produce, or for us to draw the PPC, we need to assume that we are given a fixed quantity of factors of production. In other words, the resources are going to be constant at that point in time. Of course, they can change over time. They can increase, they can decrease. But for us to draw that, we need to get a point in time. At that point in time, the resources are going to be fixed. All right. And because our resources are fixed, our resources are limited, our resources are scarce. That is what it means. Therefore, we can't produce to satisfy all our desires, all our needs and wants, right? So that brings to us the point of trade-off, right? So a trade-off is a compromise. To say you would want so much of this and so much of that, but you can't get them both. So you have to choose which one to get less, how much of each to get. So you have to compromise because the resources we have do not allow us to produce all our needs so that we can satisfy all our needs. So we have to say, okay, if I have 100 rand, then I can't buy everything I want with the 100 rand, right? If I have two things to buy, good A and good B, so I have to choose how much of B to buy and how much of A to buy. So that requires a compromise. That requires an exchange of one thing in return for another. That requires a trade-off. So a trade-off is a concept whereby we don't have sufficient resources, whereas there's unlimited uses of those resources, but the resources themselves are limited. That leads us to a trade-off. So a trade-off requires the making of choices. All right. So trade-off means that we are making a choice and we have to choose one or more of one and less of the other. So whenever we make a choice, as you have been taught, there's going to be an opportunity cost. Because if we make a choice, remember this comes from scarcity of resources and unlimited ones, then we have to make decisions. And those decisions lead to trade-offs. And as we make a trade-off, then we have to settle for a particular choice. Then when we make that choice, it's going to lead to opportunity cost. So opportunity cost is the other option you have opted against. All right. The next loss, we're going to make two options, right? And then you give up the other option. So that's the opportunity that has been lost. So it's a cost. All right, so the opportunity cost is another topic that we can do another day, but it's so much related to the concept of the PPC. Only that with the PPC, it looks at things from a macroeconomic perspective, right? From a national perspective. Whereas normally, when we look at opportunity costs, we normally study them from a microeconomics perspective. We examine the choices that individuals make, and then we look at the opportunity cost of making those decisions. Right, so these are things that you need to be familiar with. So we have covered the concept of PPC. We have covered the concept of opportunity costs, scarcity, and trade-offs. We have covered the concept of constant factors of production required in drawing up the PPC. We have covered the concept of that points on the PPC represent full employment, efficient employment. It represents the maximum possible. Right? So let us have an example. I'm not too sure if this example is from your textbook or from your study guide, because I did prepare this, I think, last year. All right. So let's say that we as a people in South Africa live to do fishing or growing potatoes, right? So for us to do fishing, remember we need labor, we need land. That's the natural resources, which basically means the sea or the river or whatever where we're living from. Well, then we need ideas or entrepreneurship. Then we need capital, maybe the fishing hooks or whatever it is. Or with our potatoes, if we are going to grow potatoes, we still need the land, labor, all right, entrepreneurship and capital. So if we decide option A to say, all right, what about if we stop fishing altogether and we just survive on potatoes? How much can we make? How many potatoes can we produce? So if we fully utilize all the natural resources we have, all the labor we have, all the entrepreneurship, the ideas, the innovation, and all the capital we have, we can produce a maximum of 100. So this is the maximum, right? But suppose we want to produce only 1 basket of fish per day. It means now we have to reduce the production of potatoes because we can't produce 100. Because for us to produce at a maximum of 100, we are producing 0 here. For us to produce 1, it means we are going to take some of the resources away from the production of potatoes to the production of fish. So we're going to produce now 1 basket. But now the resources we're going to take means that we're going to produce less of potatoes. So it goes down by 90 to 95. It goes down from 100 to 95 because we have taken resources away from the production of potatoes so that we can at least produce 1 basket. So for us to produce 1 basket, we have to make a choice, right, of taking resources away. And that's going to come at a cost. We're going to lose out 5 kilograms of potatoes a day. Because for us to produce 1, it means we have to take away some resources. And take away some resources from the production of potatoes results in us producing less potatoes by 5 kilograms per day. So the opportunity cost of getting 1 basket of fish is 5 kilograms per day of potatoes. All right. Then the opportunity cost of producing 2, again, remember now, let's say we want an option where we produce at C, right? Which is now the community actually needs 2 baskets of fish, but we can't. We have to take even more resources from potatoes, right? And now we are producing 85 potatoes, right? So if you see here, to get this additional from 1 to 2, we moved from 95 to 85. So this second basket of fish, right, has cost us 10 more kilograms. Remember, the first basket cost us 5 kilograms because we moved from 100 to 95. The second basket from 1 to 2 has cost us 95 to 85. The third basket, so the opportunity cost of producing the third basket is 15 because it drives us down to 70. Then the fourth basket is 30. Right. Then the fifth basket is 40. So as you can see, the opportunity cost keeps going up, right? As you can see here, it started as 5 for the first, then 10, then 15, then 30, then 40. So the opportunity cost keeps on growing, right? As we move along the production possibilities curve. Do you know why that's the case? So your examiners are going to ask you in that particular aspect, like, why is it the case that the opportunity cost keeps on increasing as we exchange one item for the other? All right. So this statement says the opportunity cost of each additional basket of fish increases as we move along the production possibilities curve. And here is something that is important, which I've highlighted. This is why the curve bulges outwards from the origin. In other words, this is why the PPC is concave to the origin. So I want you to underline this because they're going to ask you the reason why the PPC is bulging outwards from the origin, or why the PPC is concave to the origin. Concave means it's like that. All right. Obviously, because the more we give up, the more we take off one, the more we have to give up of the other. All right, that's the principle. And then we will add more to that just now. So I think this is the potatoes that we've been talking about. I hope so. All right, yeah, that's better. So that was now this is the PPC. All right, this is the fish. This is the potatoes. So remember, we started at 100 and we went all the way, and we lose out here. To produce one, we gave up 100 to 95, so we gave up 5. To produce the second one, we gave up from 95, because for us to move from 1 to 2, from 1 we're already at 95. To get to point C, we have to move down to 85, so we lose 10. So we keep going down, we lose again, another loss. And as you can see, the PPC curve is going to be concave to the origin. It means the opportunity cost of giving up potatoes is going to increase as we try to produce more fish. And the question is, why is that the case? Right, so I don't know if I have an answer already in the slides, because if I do have an answer already in the slides, you are very lucky. But if I haven't prepared that, then you'd have to go and search why. Is it the case that the opportunity cost keeps increasing? The more we substitute one good for the other. Why is it that the opportunity cost keeps increasing? So I want you to write down that question. And when you write down that question, try to look for an answer. That is to say, if I didn't include that on the, but chances are you are going to be lucky as we go down there. All right, so let's look at this particular PPC for now. All right. So let's look at this particular PPC for now. And let's look at the points on this PPC. Because this is also going to come in your assessment. They're going to look at, like I said to you guys, I don't remember whether I took this from the study guide or from the textbook, but these are resources that you use for your study. So it's not my own work. This thing is not my own work. This diagram here, it's the work of, so I'm not sure it's the study guide. No, look, actually I did acknowledge here. I wanted to do the acknowledgement because I can't just use people's things without acknowledgement. So it comes from Moore and Associates, right? So it comes from the textbook. I think it must be from the textbook then. So this is the previous textbook that was prescribed, but now they have stopped that prescription. It's no longer prescribed, but it's still very useful because everything is relevant. So now let's look at these points. So if you look at point A, B, C, D, and E, all these are points along the PPC. So we're talking of a movement along the PPC. All right. So we can move from this point, or we can move from that point. So it's a movement along the PPC. All right. Now, a movement along the PPC, right? A movement along the PPC represents trade-offs. We still have the same amount of resources. It's just people changing where to work, or it's resources being reassigned. It's a reassignment of resources. We still have the same quantity. We're just shifting them around. Like somebody was a nurse, and now they've become a teacher. So we have fewer nurses and more teachers. All right. So, which means we can teach more children, but we can treat fewer people. So it's just a movement along, because we still have the same number of laborers, of employees, right? Of labor. All right. But just they're moving around jobs, just changing jobs. Or if it was machinery, we're just moving a machinery from producing potatoes to fishing, but we still have the same capital. All right. So when we move resources that we already have from one job to the other, it's going to result in a movement along the PPC. Your examiners are going to ask you, what's the movement along the PPC represent? Or they're going to give you a scenario where one resource is used for another. Say one person was employed in the computer industry, and then they decided to move to be a banker. All right. Then obviously we still have the same amount of people. All right. That's for assumption, for the sake of assumption. We assume that they're gonna produce at the same level. All right. So it's an assumption. Nothing has changed. We still have the same resources. So we're gonna just get more of one and less of the other. That is basically all these points on the PPC represents those trade-offs, those choices. Right? Brilliant. And now so these points on the PPC, I said they represent a movement along the PPC, which is a shifting of resources. But so any point on the PPC also represents, what does it represent? It represents full employment. It represents efficient utilization of the resources. A point on the PPC means we can't get more without reducing the other. Right? Any point on the PPC means we have reached our limit. We can't get more of one without reducing the other. All right. But then there's point H, which is inside the PPC. So point H is inside the PPC. So it represents that although it represents a point where we can produce 2 buckets of what? Of fish and 70, because that is where we are. So there's the 2 baskets and 70 potatoes, kilograms. But actually, using the same resources, we could have produced 85 kilograms, right? Because it's not a point on the PPC. We could produce more. We are producing less than we can. So point H means we are producing less than possible. And why is that the case? A point inside the PPC means we are producing less than possible, right? So that's the first thing you need to know. It's less than possible. And then the second aspect is we can actually improve production of one. We can improve production of one without reducing production of the other. All right. So like in this case, we could move from the production of 70 to produce 85. We're still producing at 2 because it was a point inside. So a point inside the PPC represents inefficiency. We are not being efficient in the utilization of resources. All right, it represents inefficiency. It also represents inefficiency is the same thing as underutilization. All right, so we have the resources, but we're not putting them to their full use. And it also represents unemployment. All right, or both of those. To say some resources are lying idle without being utilized at all. Or if every resource is being utilized, it's not being efficiently utilized. Right. So it's a point that is possible, but it also represents less than what we could, less than the maximum. So it's less than the maximum possible. Then we got this point. So we have this point on the what? Outside the cave, right? So we have this point G, which is outside the cave. This point is not attainable. It's unattainable. Right. So it means that with the current resources that we have, we are unable, even if we utilize them to their full capacity, we are unable to produce at this level. We can only be able to produce at that level if the resources increase. But with the resources that we currently have, we are unable to produce. So this point is unattainable. It represents scarcity of resources. So this point there represents scarcity of resources. In particular, of course, a lot of things represent scarcity, like the movement along also represents scarcity. But this one more especially represents scarcity because we don't have sufficient resources to what? To produce this quantity which we want. Okay. And for us to be able to produce at this level, remember the quantity of our resources needs to improve. So our resources are land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. So if we get new ideas or new innovations, then we can reach there. Because we can still use the resources we have, but we have new ideas of how to use them. So we can eventually reach there. Or we can develop new capital, new machines, new machinery, and we can now reach there. Or we can have employees who are well trained and they know their job, so they produce faster and more efficient. Or things become favorable. For example, it starts to rain in South Africa the whole year, every day it's going to be raining, for example. Then obviously, it's easier, we catch more fish, perhaps. So something becomes favorable in our natural resources. Let's say we discover more gold in the Limpopo there, or we discover oil in the Eastern Cape, so our resources have increased, so we can eventually reach here. All right. So that is what that point represents. Right, so let me see, because when I go through this now, I see a lot of points to talk about, but I forget which ones I covered, which ones I didn't. So let me go through the next slide to see. Right, so these are the points, right? So we talk of scarcity is illustrated by the fact that all points to the right of the curve are unattainable. That represents scarcity. So they're going to ask you in your assessment, how is scarcity represented in the PPC? So you need to remember this, right? And the curve that we have forms a boundary between what is possible and what is not possible. So everything on the curve inwards is possible. Then everything outside the curve is not possible. Then they will also ask how is choice illustrated? So choice is illustrated by the need to choose among the available combinations along the curve. So choice is illustrated by those combinations along the curve, right? From A, B, C, D, E, all those represent choice, right? You can choose A and or choose B or choose C. So all those aspects represent choices. And then opportunity cost or trade-offs are illustrated by the negative slope of the curve. Right? So these are very important points. I'm actually glad that I wrote them down. Right. So opportunity cost, right, or trade-offs is illustrated by the negative slope of the curve. So these are questions you must expect, and you already have the answers. And the negative slope means that we can obtain more of one good by sacrificing the other good as we move along the curve. And remember that concept of the concave. PPC is concave. And we said that it's concave to the origin because it reflects the principle of increasing opportunity cost. And I've demonstrated to you using that example. And you have seen it, how the more baskets of fish we want to get, the more potatoes we have to sacrifice. The first one we sacrifice 5. The second one we sacrifice 10. The next 15. The other 30. Then at the fifth basket of fish, we sacrificed 40 of it. So it becomes more expensive. So opportunity cost keeps on increasing. That's why the curve is concave. And why is that it's concave, or why is the opportunity cost keeps on increasing? Or rather, why does the opportunity cost keep on increasing? Right, so I said to you, if you are lucky, and I realize here that you guys are actually very lucky, because it says I did prepare this for you. And the answer is, as the economy reallocates resources from the production of potatoes to the production of fish, right, it initially gives up the least valuable units. So the least valuable units, or the least valuable potatoes, is what we give up first. Those that we really don't quite like. Say, maybe we have different varieties of potatoes, and there are those we particularly don't like anyway. So if we're gonna move people from producing potatoes to fish, then we're gonna pull them out of those things we don't particularly like. So it doesn't cost us that much. That's why the opportunity cost is low, because we didn't quite like it. So that's why we say it initially gives up the least valuable. But as more resources are shifted, then we keep on giving what is increasingly valuable, right? Leading to higher opportunity cost. So this is one of the explanations. So I want you to look for the other explanation, all right? If you are lucky, we're gonna come across it in the next slide. But I prepared this last year, remember, so I've forgotten what's there, what's not there. All right. But if you guys are very lucky, then we're gonna get the second reason. So this is the first reason, like giving up initially is easy because we initially give up the least valuable units. Then the more we need more resources, then it's going to touch on those things that we loved so dearly now, and it hurts. So that's why the opportunity cost increases. The cost of the loss keeps on increasing. Right. So that's the first reason. And let's see if you guys are lucky. I don't think you are. We will see. But if you are not lucky, then I want you to look for the what? For the second reason why the PPC is concave. So let's talk of efficiency, right? Right. So we have technical efficiency. Technical efficiency refers to the fact that we are already using something, using our resources on so we are using our resources on production or producing something, right? All right. And then we use those resources efficiently. Okay. So technical efficiency means we have already allocated resources to the production of potatoes already. So of those resources we have allocated to the production of potatoes, we want to check how are we using them. So if we're using them efficiently, then we achieve what is referred as technical efficiency. All right. So that's going to be technical efficiency. So technical efficiency means we have already allocated and we want to see how is it going there. It's going very well. So that's technical efficiency. Right. So it's achieved when an economy produces the maximum possible amount of output from a given set of inputs or resources. So we've already identified the resources and we've applied them to work. Now I want to see how they are performing. So if they're performing to the maximum level, that's technical efficiency. Then we come to the concept of allocative efficiency. So allocative efficiency is different from technical efficiency in the sense that with technical efficiency, we're looking at the output, right? But with allocative efficiency, we look at what I could say goodness. So this is my own term that I invented just now, goodness of fit, right? Also, if you want, you can also say goodness of fit, right? Then you can we can show you how this fit also applies if they are good, right? So allocative efficiency means the resources we have allocated to potatoes actually are suitable for potato production, you know. So like we take guys who have knowledge of potatoes, right? So that's allocative efficiency. We take those guys who know agriculture, then we allocate them to production of potatoes. Then we take those guys who are good with fishing, then we allocate them to fishing. So that's allocative efficiency. Right. Right. So that is allocative efficiency. In other words, you're going to produce the maximum because when we talk of allocative efficiency, we're saying things have been assigned to where they produce the greatest benefit. Right. So if you do that, if you provide the greatest amount of consumer satisfaction, given the available resources. All right. So allocative efficiency is about how do you allocate to various resources. Okay. So it's like we want to play soccer. Let's talk of soccer. Let's talk of Bafana, or let's talk of rugby. But no, let's not talk rugby. Let's talk soccer. Let's talk Bafana. Right? So we have a goalkeeper there. It's Ronwen Williams, right? Ronwen Williams. Right. So, and we have Percy Tau is a striker, right? So I'm just going to use the example of these two guys, right? So allocative efficiency means we take Ronwen Williams and we make him the goalkeeper, all right? Because he's really good there, right? And we take Percy Tau and we make him a striker because he's really good there. So this is allocative efficiency. We allocate people to the best places they can work. Now, technical efficiency is when this guy in the goalkeeping is doing his best, because we can put him there and that's best allocative efficiency, but then he doesn't perform. So that's not technical efficiency. Technical efficiency is when you actually do perform, right? Given where you have been assigned, you actually do become man of the match. So that's technical efficiency. But then allocative inefficiency is when we take Percy Tau, we are being inefficient and we make him the goalkeeper. All right. And we take Ronwen Williams, who's a goalkeeper, and we make him the striker. So we haven't been efficient in the way we allocate our resources to their where they are best suited for. So goodness of fit, right, is not being followed there. But of course, somebody could be technically efficient. He can do his best. Percy Tau can do his best as a goalkeeper, but still, that's not efficient. That's not allocatively efficient. He could give his best, which is technical efficiency, but in the wrong place. All right. So for us to produce in the production possibilities curve, we have to achieve both allocative efficiency and technical efficiency. All right. So any point on the PPC represents allocative efficiency and technical efficiency. Because the moment we are not efficient anymore, right, if we are not going to be efficient, then we will be inside here. It's going to be technical inefficiency or allocative, but we are not going to get the best output out of that, right? So that's the concepts of technical efficiency and allocative efficiency. Then let's talk of optimal combinations of goods and services. So remember, people have choices, right? Make choices. The nation makes choices. Right. So this is what South Africa can do in producing potatoes. All right. So we're gonna produce potatoes. We're gonna produce fish, right? But now the question that's is gonna be a problem is how much fish do we want in South Africa and how much potato? So we can fight about that. So that concerns the concept of optimal. So along this A, B, C, D, E, F, we do not know which point is optimal. Of course, all of them are efficient. All of them represent full employment, right? But which one is optimal? So optimal is the combination we want. So people in the Eastern Cape could want this because they really love potatoes, you know. Fish are nothing, but perhaps people in the Limpopo love fish so much and not much of potatoes. So which one is the best? How do we reconcile those differences? All right. So we won't be able to know the optimal on the PPC unless we are told the interest of the people, what is going to satisfy their needs most. And this comes to a concept which we refer to as normative economics, where people are going to debate which one is the best. And then which also leads us to another concept of types of economies in the world where people have methods of allocating resources. So your Minister of Finance would choose for you, like, okay, this year we're going to allocate so much resources to producing fish and so much to producing potatoes, and he will decide for you how much fish you're gonna get, you know. So that's how also decisions are made, right? Then we come to the concept of shifts of the PPC. Remember, we've been talking about the movement along, and we said the movement along means the reassigning of resources, right? Somebody was working there in the Eastern Cape, they move on to the Northwest, you know. So there's still the same quantity of and same quantity and quality, let's assume. But now a shift in the PPC means the amount of resources has changed. It doesn't have anything to do with the actual reassigning of resources. So it's either now we can produce more or we can produce less. It has to do with what is possible. Right. So a shift in the PPC means our potential has changed. So it could be due to more resources, or can have more technology or more skills level. So what you look for in your questions is, let's say there's unusually favorable weather is doing very well. It's raining somehow in South Africa, it's drizzling all year long. Then obviously our agricultural output can expand, right? So it's much better. Or we discover more gold than this natural resources. Or we now utilizing more efficient machinery. Or our guys have been trained at Harvard, they come back, medical doctors, they know better, you know, they are going through training for IT, they know IT better. So all those things are gonna result in us producing, being able, our potential to produce more is increased, right? Or it could be workers from other countries coming to South Africa and setting up businesses and setting up whatever they. So at the end of the day, what we can produce as a nation has improved. So that results in a shift. A shift can be outward or inward. All right. All right. So, all right. So all those things like, so I'm saying these things because I want you to be able to pick up, but they're gonna give you scenarios, right? Like this has happened to South Africa. What's gonna happen to the PPC? All right. So let's say we set up more universities and training centers. What's going to happen to production? Obviously, human capital is going to improve. More skills means we produce better. So the PPC shifts outwards. Or we have accumulated more capital. All right. So we have more resources now available. So PPC is going to shift outward. Or there's been a change in technology. We have faster, better computers. All right. So you need to look at whether our potential to produce has increased. Okay. Then there's going to be a shift outward. An inward shift means we are suffering from a depletion of resources. Right. So a depletion of resources could be that we start a war here in South Africa with with Russia. All right. And then we all go to war and our men get finished off. Then we have less to produce. So we have our PPC is going to shift inward, right? It's going to shift inward. So if I can draw a diagram, let me see if I don't have one already. Right, I think I have one. Right, so this is an outward shift. All right, because we can produce more. We can produce more. And when our resources have depleted, then there's a shift inward. So you can think of what's going to deplete our resources. Say let's say there's war, there is disease, right? People will get sick and die off, and there is let's say they will get sanctions, then we can't do as much as we used to. And let's say we have what else? Like a drought, right? There's drought or flooding, or what is those things called? Tropical storms that are going to damage stuff, right? So anything that reduces our potential, then it's going to lead to a downward shift of the PPC. Right, so that you should be able to make sense of that. So we've already spoken about the movement along the PPC, and I think we've covered that. So this is just for the so I've also explained this, so probably this is a repetition. So I said to you, if you are lucky, you will come across another reason, right? So another reason is the concept of diminishing marginal returns. This is another reason why we have a concave PPC. Right, so you guys are very lucky. So the first one we said, this is the first one, right? The second one is assuming we have, of course, we had achieved allocative efficiency, right? So let's now talk of right. Let's talk of rugby and football. Right. So we have players there, all our players. Let's say we have 100 people to play rugby, and we have to take from. So the total population is 100 in South Africa. So we allocate some. If we all decide just to play rugby, then we can play so much rugby, so good. Let's say points. We can get so much points. If we play soccer, we can get so much points only. But now, if you decide to play soccer and rugby as well, all right, which means that you have to play a little bit of soccer here. So the first guys you're gonna take, right, are those who are not good with rugby. Like, you guys suck. So why don't you go to soccer? So it doesn't, you don't feel the pain of playing, you don't feel the pain of the allocate, the shifting, right? But as you keep on playing more soccer, then it means that you're gonna take some of the guys who are really good with rugby, right? But they're not good at soccer at all. So the loss on rugby, because these guys are really good, the last guys we're gonna take from rugby as we move towards soccer, those are the ones that were left behind who are really, really, really good. So taking one means we're gonna lose a lot of rugby, but giving him over to soccer means we're gonna get a little soccer. So that's the concept of diminishing marginal returns, right? We say as an economy allocates more resources to the production of one good while keeping the production of the other constant. We say the resources that are best suited for rugby are best suited for soccer are utilized first, right? Then eventually, if you take those guys from rugby to soccer, this leads to a situation where you're going to lose a lot more points in your rugby because you're giving up increasing amounts because for you to produce more of soccer, you need to give up more of the good rugby players, right? So you give up increasing amounts, and eventually that is why the PPC is going to be concave. So this is the second reason, right? So we have two reasons, right? So we have two reasons, if I can summarize them. The first reason for the PPC there is that the value of the items given up keeps increasing, right? Keeps increasing. And the second one is that the goodness of fit. All right. Like I said, if we take people from farming to fishing, right? We take those who are not good at. So let's say we take people from farming to fishing, right? The first people we take from farming, right, to fishing, those are ones who are not good farmers already. So we go, guys, since you are not good farmers, can you just go to fishing? Right. Okay. So the effect on farming is low, but if we give up more farmers, now we end up taking the best farmers there to go to fishing. So the loss keeps on increasing because we're taking those which are valuable. And as we take those farmers who are so good, remember, they are not so good with fishing as well. So it means that the loss are bigger. The loss of losing someone who's so good with farming and allocating him to fishing where he is not so good means the loss keeps on increasing. So those are the two reasons why it's more like one that can be expanded into two. Right, now let's talk of, so what is this? All right, so I think I wanted to explain something here. All right, so it was linked to that, but I haven't made use of it because we have already discussed that. Now let's talk of improvement of techniques. All right. So this is, let's say this is consumer goods, this is capital goods. And is an improvement in the production techniques. Look, the resources for everything remain the same. Our land is still the same. Our labor is still the same. Let's say labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. And then we're just able to find a method of producing capital goods better. All right, so maybe there is an innovation only in the production of capital goods. So what we can produce for consumer goods remains the same, but now for capital goods, it has grown. All right, so there's going to be a swivel. We refer to this as a swivel, not a shift. It's a swivel. So there's a swivel from the capital goods side of the PPC to represent the improved technique in producing more capital goods with the available resources. Right, so this is an improved technique, right? And the production possibility curve swivels from AB, which is the original, to AC. But what we can produce for consumer goods remains the same. And we can also reason the same for if there is an improvement in consumer goods, then there's going to be a swivel in this direction of consumer goods. So basically, that is almost everything that we wanted to cover on the production possibilities case. Right, because we have spent almost an hour, we have to stop now, because if we keep on going, then we will spend too much time on this. So another time, if we have a chance, we're going to discuss questions, previous assessment questions that cover these the PPC. All right. So for now, we're going to stop here, and thank you very, very much for joining us.